Okay, so we're going to do a new passage. As I said, a difficult passage, but let's give it a try, yeah? Now, let me first read the passage. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels, authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. So this passage that we have just read is one of the most difficult passages in the New Testament to explain, and maybe even in the whole Bible. It's a difficult passage because there are problems in the translation. The Greek here is a very difficult to understand Greek, and so there are problems in translating. And even after you manage to translate it properly, there are problems in interpreting what Peter is trying to say. And Peter may have been totally clear to his congregation when he first wrote this, or when he first preached this. But we are 2,000 years away from him, and we have no idea what his culture was. Not very much, we know something, but we don't know everything. And we don't know the mindsets of the people then. And so we sometimes have problems interpreting. So you will find me talking a lot about how a Jewish mind would think, because that's what we believe, that this passage would obviously be written from a point of view of a Jew of the 1st century. And so it will be written for him to understand, or her to understand, so there will be that mindset and the culture that we have to look into to understand this passage. So this week, I will just focus on the difficult issues first, and before I go on to explain the meaning of the fuller passage. So there are 2 problems. The first problem relates to what Christ did after he died. So that's verses 19 and 20. What did Jesus do? What did he do after he died? And there were 3 days in the tomb, and then there was the resurrection, and then there was the ascension. So Peter is trying to explain that, and we need to understand. Of course, Peter is writing all that to comfort his flock. He's telling them, you're going to get persecution soon, and before you get persecution, I'm going to teach you what your faith is all about, so that you will not be frightened. You will only fear God and not human beings, and you will be comforted. And the comfort comes from the fact that you are following a God who is in control of this world that looks broken and out of control. So we need to understand first verses 19 and 20. And the second problem concerns the teaching about baptism, which is in verse 21. And we will probably not have time for that this week. I intend to deal only with the first problem this week. What did Christ do after he died? Verses 19 to 20. So these verses raise 5 questions. What did Christ do? And the 5 questions are, where did Christ go? Peter says he went somewhere. He went. Where did he go? Who did he speak to? What did he say to them? What did he preach to them? And 4, why did he do this? Why did he even go there? And when did he do this? So the more important questions first, and the last question is not quite as important. But let's go through that. Now, the Apostles' Creed that many of us would recite in church every so often, we recite it. Some churches recite it every week. And that's the one which says, I believe in God the Father, Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, and so on. And then somewhere in the middle, he descended to the dead. And Peter is going to talk about this. So he descended to the dead. On the third day, he rose again. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. Now, if you read 1 Peter carefully, the passage we are going to do this week and next week actually covers this last part here. He descended to the dead. He rose again. He ascended into heaven. He's seated at the right hand of the Father. So the Apostles' Creed is actually based, quite a lot of it, on this passage in 1 Peter. So next time you recite the Apostles' Creed, remember this. So the passage we just read in verse 19, we are told, he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. So the first part, where did he go? And the second part, next week, what is the baptism about? So one of the problems with this passage is that many of us probably are more familiar with the Apostles' Creed because we, recite it very often than 1 Peter. And so when we come to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 19, and we read, he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, we have preconceived ideas. Okay, we have some ideas we already formed in our mind, and we read our ideas into the words. We shouldn't do that. We have many ideas, they may be wrong ideas, and we are interpreting the Bible from our preconceived ideas. We should actually let the Word of God speak to us directly. So when people remember the Apostles' Creed, he descended to the dead, then they read that as, Jesus went to hell. So they presume straight away that this means, when they read the Apostles' Creed, that Jesus went down to hell. There are 2 problems, however. 2 problems relate to space and place. What do I mean? See, when you say went down, that's a direction, right? It has to do with space. And yes, it's true, the ancient Jews conceived of space as up in heaven, down in Sheol, and here we are in the middle on earth. So space and place. Hell is space. Is it a space down there? Is there even a space? And isn't hell a place to punish evil people? So that's a place problem, right? Why would Jesus go to a place where people are punished? He's not evil, and he's not going to be punished. So why did he go to hell? So 2 problems. One, especially for us modern people, we don't think of space, hell being a space down there, because we know if you dig deep enough, it goes to the mantle of the earth and then the core of the earth, and it's liquid, and there's no hell there unless you think that liquid is hell. So is hell down there? But if you go down there deep enough, you come up to Australia. So where's hell? So where did Jesus go? So is hell down there? No. These are the 2 questions, right? Is hell down there? No. Is hell a place to punish evil people? Yes. So did Jesus go there? No. Obviously, Jesus won't be punished, so he won't be going to hell. So then, where did he go? So I said hell, I'm going to say that first, hell is not spatial. It's not a space. It's not down there. Hell is another dimension, a spiritual dimension. We do not know where it is. Maybe it's beside us all the time and we don't know it. It's another dimension. So it's not about space. It's outside of space, outside of time. Hell is not the space. So it's not down there, because down there is all the minerals and the mantle of the earth and the core of the earth. All right? And Christ did not go to hell, because hell is a place to punish the evil people, and hell is a place that judgment will take place on Judgment Day. So it's not taken place yet. And in any case, let me give you that clear assurance. In this passage, Peter does not even mention hell. The word hell is not there. We read hell into those words. Okay? No hell mentioned at all. So where did Jesus go? Now, some of us may be a bit more well-read about the Bible. Then we say, wait, hang on, Pastor Kiat, how about Ephesians chapter 4, verses 9 to 10? What does it say? And this is the quotation from Ephesians 4, 9 to 10. In saying he ascended, Paul is writing this, in saying he ascended, what does it mean? But that he had also descended into the lower regions, the earth. He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. So, there, see, doesn't Paul say that Jesus has descended into the lower regions? Yeah, but again, does it say hell? Lower regions, the earth? Is Paul meaning hell? The word hell is not there. So what does it mean? Ephesians 4, really, I think we think back to the first century Jew. And in the Old Testament, despite the wisdom of all the prophets and all the teachers of Israel, I guess God in his gradual revelation did not yet fully tell them what happens in the afterlife after they die. So if you read the Psalms, you read Ecclesiastes, you read all these writings by the wise prophets of Israel, they talk about Sheol. They talk about when a person dies, he goes to Sheol. And sometimes they say the pit, is a deep place, is a pit, is a hole that we dig into the ground. And during the years between the two testaments, the Old Testament and the New Testament, 400 years, where the Jewish rabbis and the teachers began to develop a doctrine as almost like a doctrine of hell. And they were, of course, affected by Greek thinking about heaven and hell. And they were influencing each other, I guess. So in the Old Testament, there was only a vague idea of the afterlife. And Sheol is really just the NIV sometimes translate Sheol as the grave, the pit, the grave. It is a place when you die and you are buried. You're in the darkness, in the earth. That's it. You're in the earth. Where do you go? Don't know. One day God will come back and bring us to heaven. But until then, we wait. And then in the intertestament ages, the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament, they began to develop this idea about the bosom of Abraham. So if I'm a good person, I go to Abraham. And so when Jesus told the story about Lazarus and rich man, when Lazarus died, he went to the bosom of Abraham, and he was with Abraham, and he looked down at the rich man, and the rich man was down there, and there was a chasm, a big gap between them, and it could not be crossed. So they were beginning to develop this idea of a place where people go who are wicked and who will be punished. And the rich man is in thirst, and he says, "Give me some water." And no, you can't get it. Well, then go and tell my family, please don't do evil because you're coming to this place to suffer. So they began to develop an idea of a place of punishment, and maybe there was some influence from the Greek philosophy too. Now, the Greeks had different names for a place of punishment. There was the word Hades. Hades is where you go when you die, and there's a gateway, and you walk through. And there was also Tartarus, and Tartarus was another part of hell where you get punished even more. So it was used, this word Hades, the Greek word Hades, was then used to translate the Hebrew Old Testament, because by the 1st century, because of Alexander the Great, the Jews no longer spoke Hebrew. They no longer spoke, some of them spoke Aramaic, but most of them would speak Greek. And so the Hebrew Old Testament was then translated into Greek. And when the rabbis saw this word Sheol, they used the Greek word Hades to translate it. So when we read Peter or Paul or any of the apostles write in the Greek the word Hades, the best translation is still Sheol. Sheol is just grave. It's a place where dead people go. It's not about punishment. It is about dying and being buried. So Jesus went to Sheol, the lower regions of earth, Hades. So it simply means he died. It's a place where all dead people go. So it's not hell. In the early days, I think when they didn't understand the Greek and the Hebrew that well, some of the translators did translate Hades as hell. Okay, and that's where the misunderstanding begins. So where did Jesus go? He went down into Sheol. Yeah, he was buried into the ground. And he went to Hades, of the pit, okay, where the dead go, all the dead go. In other words, this is metaphorically an expression of the fact that he really, really died. Like all human beings, he came to earth as a man, he died as a man, and that's it, you know. And if that was only it, then we are not saved because he did not rise. Paul says the resurrection is so important. If Christ did not rise, then his death is simply a death like any other prophet. No use. He can't save. And if he saved anyone, it's not for eternity. So he had to rise from the dead, Paul says. And if you read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, it's very clear that when Jesus, and if you read the Gospels, John 21 and so on, the last parts of all the Gospels, you find that Jesus rose and he had a body. He told Thomas, touch me, put your hands in my wounds. You can see my wounds, you can feel it, touch me and I can eat, give me something to eat. And they gave him something to eat and he ate. So Jesus had a body after he's resurrected. Jesus wasn't a spirit, a ghost floating around, because ghosts cannot eat. So Jesus really died and he really was buried, and for 3 days he was down in the earth. And then he rose again. He rose again with his whole body, his spirit and his body. And we have to remember this is what the Old Testament has said all along. The Greeks were the ones who separated body and soul. Greek philosophy says body is bad and we throw it away when we die. Spirit is good, the soul is good, it will go on forever. The Hebrew people never had that concept at all. When we live, we are body and soul. When we die, we are body and soul. When we go to heaven, we are body and soul. So never forget that Jesus was body and soul. He was never disembodied. He wasn't a spirit floating around. So when verse 19 says, Christ went to the spirits in prison, we have to understand all that background. Yeah, bear that in mind first. I'm not going to explain too much yet. Just remember what I just said about the Hebrew mindset. Now, the word Peter uses here, in case you want to know, is phylake, which is prison, which is not hell. Okay, it's about prison. It's a prison where spirits are imprisoned. Of course, then people conceive, well, where can spirits be in prison, must be hell. That's the preconception. Because we need to ask the question, what sort of prison was that? What's the Bible teaching about that prison? It's a prison for spirits, verse 19 tells us. So it's a very special prison. Has it got to be in hell? Well, it doesn't say here. But Peter helps us. Because in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, Peter mentions Tartarus. He says Tartarus is a dungeon for fallen angels imprisoned there till judgment day. So Peter gives us a clue what the prison is. It's a prison for fallen angels. And they are waiting for their judgment. God has locked them up. Of course, then we could ask, then how about all the demons running around? Well, there are angels who may fall later on who are still running around, but there were a certain group of angels already imprisoned there, and they will be released only at judgment day for the judge to judge them. God will judge them. So who did Jesus speak to? He spoke to the spirits in prison. Verse 19 tells us that. And verse 20 gives us a clue who were these spirits. They were the ones who formerly did not obey in the days of Noah. So these were fallen angels during the times of Noah. And what do we know of Noah? In Genesis chapter 6, that's what we learn about the flood and Noah. And he was son of Lamech. He was the son of Enoch. And Enoch walked with God and he never died. So the Jewish thought here is that these are the evil angels who cohabited with the humans, and they came down from heaven, they fell, they decided to live like human beings, they cohabited with the daughters of men, and then they had children, and the children were called the Nephilim. So in Jewish thought and teaching, these angels, the fallen angels, evil, and they cohabited with men, and that's why the generation of Noah was wicked, thoroughly wicked, so wicked that God wanted to destroy all of them. And so Peter was speaking to Jews who knew this story very well. It's about Genesis 6, fallen angels coming to earth and having children with earthly people, and creating a generation of very wicked people. So Genesis tells us of the generation in which Noah lived, a generation so evil that God grieved. God was so grieved and sad. In Genesis 6 verse 7, we're told God grieved and he decided to destroy all of them, wipe them off from the face of the earth. God regretted that he had created humankind. But verse 8, the grace of God, Noah found favor in God's eyes. So God saved Noah and his family. God didn't save just Noah, but he decided to save Noah's family of 8 in a boat. Now on the screen here on my right, I've got this Chinese character, boat. Chuan, and it's very fascinating to me. I'm not saying this is how the Chinese word started, but it hints of some knowledge of Genesis, I think, because here, this side of the character on the left side is the character for a boat, and in this boat there's the figure 8. This is 8. And this is a mouse. So 8 mouths on the boat. That's the ark. Anyway, fascinating. So the belief is that people were very evil during this time. And the Jews believe that these people were evil because they were misled by the fallen angels, right? Evil spirits. Because when they were created, they were good spirits, angels, and then when they fell, they became evil spirits. They were evil because they decided to disobey God. So some think that these spirits refer to the spirits of the humans who lived at this time. Verse 19, the spirits refer to the human spirits. But most scholars today reject that interpretation. The spirits here do not refer to the spirits of human beings, because the Jews, as I said, that's a very Greek idea. The Jews don't conceive of a spirit separated from a body at all. So most scholars reject that interpretation because it conceives of dead people existing only as spirits, and the Jews don't do that. So Jews don't believe that dead people's spirits leave their bodies at all. So there is a body and a spirit lying in the ground until God says, rise, and all will rise. At the end of history, on Judgment Day, all the bodies will rise together with the spirits and they will be judged. Resurrection is of the whole body and soul. And therefore, there are even some preachers and teachers of the Bible, I think they are not well read, and they even teach that there's body, soul, and spirit. There are three parts of the human being, just like God is a trinity, so human beings are a trinity. Rubbish, because spirit and soul means the same thing. And the Hebrew word translated soul is nephesh, and nephesh originally means neck. And because when you squeeze a person's neck or you cut his neck, he dies. So nephesh became a word for life, well-being, your whole person, your existence. You cut off nephesh, you cut off your whole existence. So nephesh was never a separate spirit. So Christ went and proclaimed. Christ went and preached, some versions translated. What did he preach? Verse 19. So that's the third question. Second question is, where did he go? He went to Tartarus. And who did he speak to? He spoke to the fallen angels. So now the third question, what did he preach? Well, he preached something. The ESV translates this word as proclamation, because this word in Greek can mean an announcement, a proclamation. You proclaim something. So the emperor, there's a new emperor, so the herald, the news messenger will come and stand up in the marketplace and say, now we have a new emperor, or now the emperor has a new son. So there's a proclamation. So some scholars believe that Jesus went to Tartarus to preach the salvation message. But the Old Testament makes it clear that angels are not going to be saved for heaven. They will be destroyed in Revelations. We know for sure now in the New Testament. So angels won't get saved. So why would Jesus preach a salvation message to angels? No, he didn't preach a salvation message. He didn't preach the gospel. So some people get out of that problem by saying, oh, that's why we say these are spirits of human beings who disobeyed during the time of Noah, and God is giving them a second chance to believe the gospel, so they become saved. Can that be? Can dead people be preached to? Now, first, the word proclamation or preaching does not always mean preaching the gospel. Okay, that's clear. It doesn't mean when the word is used, we don't always think that it's the gospel that's being preached. Okay, the word is used for many other purposes. Now, how about this idea that Jesus preached to the spirits of human beings so that they will repent and be given a second chance? Hebrews 9:27 says, no, doesn't happen. We die only once, and after that, judgment. Very clear statement. No ambiguity about it. We all have one life. We die, and it's judgment. So don't get a second chance. Don't ever hope. There's no second chance after we die. The Bible is very clear about that. So Jesus did not go there to preach the gospel message to those who had died before him. Jesus went to preach to fallen angels who will not be saved. They do not get saved. Jesus died to save human beings, not angels. So, as I said, most modern scholars believe that Jesus went to proclaim to the spirits. What he proclaimed then? Well, he proclaimed that he had resurrected. He lives again. They tried to kill him. Satan tried to kill him. The evil spirits were all on that side of Satan. They were trying to kill him, but he rose again. And so Jesus proclaimed his victory over death and his victory over Satan. And he said to the fallen angels, I'm sure, he said, now your judgment is certain. It is sealed. I have triumphed over death and evil, and you will be punished, and I will be your judge. Jesus preached that message. Okay, so we come to this question, why did he have to do that? Well, Jesus proclaimed to the evil spirits that he reigns. He's triumphant. So now he is the king. And he is in control. He is sovereign. Everything is now under him. And so we see in verse 20, Peter says, now the angels, authorities, and the powers are all subjected to him. They have to submit to him. So Jesus is telling the evil spirits, don't ever think of rebellion again. You will submit to me, and I will be your judge and your king. So if Christ is king and judge over evil spirits, then Christians have nothing to fear. Why do you fear evil spirits? You have nothing to fear. Christ is king over them too, and they have to submit to him. So if you read the Gospels, when the evil spirits were confronted by Jesus, they pleaded with him, please spare us. You know, it is not yet time. Well, not yet time for judgment. So please let us go. And remember, there was the incident where Jesus said, all right, 2,000 of you, you will go into the pigs. And the pigs then jumped into the lake and drowned. So Jesus allowed, when he exorcised the man with the evil spirits, he had 2,000 of them inside him. And he was so strong, he could break iron chains. So Jesus cleared the spirits from this man and sent them into the pigs, which then jumped over the cliff and died in the lake. So Peter is saying to his disciples, do not be afraid. The Roman emperor is evil. He looks very powerful. We are few. The soldiers are plentiful. We are unarmed. They have swords and arrows and spears. Do not be afraid of them, because Christ is watching over you and protecting you. So persecution, which you are facing, and it will grow worse, whether this persecution is originally from Satan or originally from human beings like the emperor, do not be afraid. You will not be crushed, and do not be discouraged. So remember then, Peter is giving a message of comfort. It's a message of comfort to his flock. Okay, so the fifth question then, final question, when did this happen? When did Christ go and preach this message? Three possibilities. First is in the 3 days between his death and resurrection, when he was in the tomb. Second possibility, after the resurrection, he rose and then he went to preach. And then he appeared to Mary, or maybe then he appeared, or in between, after his resurrection, in between, in the 40 days on earth, he went and preached to the spirits. Possibly. And the third possibility is on his ascension, on his way into heaven, up into heaven, he preached. So by the way, right? On the way to heaven, he went to Tartarus to preach. And so if we remember that Tartarus is not a space, Hades is not a space, it doesn't have to be down there. It doesn't have to be anywhere. It's another dimension, right? Outside of space and time. Then it is possible on his way to heaven, he stopped by to preach to the evil spirits. So if Tartarus is not spatial, it is not down there, it's not up there, it is somewhere, then Jesus went there to proclaim his victory and his ascension, right? So therefore, Christ, we don't know, maybe it doesn't really matter really whether he preached it in the time in the tomb. I don't think so, because remember I said the Jews don't believe in a disembodied spirit, so it won't be Jesus floating around as a spirit preaching to spirits. So I would exclude that. It's probably after the resurrection and maybe even on the way to heaven, the ascension. Okay, so Jesus visited the imprisoned evil spirits after the resurrection. Now, how do I come to that conclusion? I didn't. It's what many scholars think, because when they look at verse 18, and I'll explain verse 18 eventually, but verse 18 talks about Jesus being alive in the Spirit, which in the Greek actually means that not that the Holy Spirit came to him or that the Holy Spirit was working in him, but that he became a spiritual person with a spiritual body and a spirit that is imperishable, that we all will have when we are resurrected. Imperishable body, imperishable spirit. So he was in that spirit, which means that he was already resurrected. So verse 18 says, Jesus Christ died in the body, and then he was made alive spiritually, and then he went. Okay, verse 19. So the flow is logical. He died, he's buried, he rose again. Now his body and spirit moving around. He can move anywhere. He's one moment in Jerusalem, next moment he's in Galilee, and he could, it's like he didn't need to walk anymore. It's a different body. He could walk through dimensions, perhaps. So he went at that time to Tartarus. So the flow is logical and grammatical. It's just the language. And so I believe Jesus went to preach this message in Tartarus to the fallen angels after his resurrection, and perhaps even on his way to heaven, where he's now gone. Verse 22. So you see the logical flow and the grammatical flow, right? Jesus died, then he was buried, and then he rose, and then he went up to heaven. Verse 22. And now he's on the right hand of God. So verse 22, that's the flow of events, probably, right? The logical and the grammatical flow. Okay, so that's quite a bit to digest. I want to stop a little bit earlier so that we can have all the questions you have. I'm quite sure you have many, many questions. So let's go.